Welcome to BizTech's Technology Show. Our guest for today is Karen Ng. Karen is the Regional Head of Expansion and Market Lead for Singapore, Hong Kong, ASEAN, India at Deel. Now, Deel is an all-in-one HR platform for global teams. It helps companies simplify every aspect of managing international workforce from culture, onboarding, local payroll, and compliance. Now, to tell us more, Karen, welcome to the show.
Hi, Brian. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very glad to be here, reporting direct as well from KL. So what a pleasure to be talking to you today. Special week for us, to be honest. Deel just launched in Malaysia just last week. So we are reaffirming our commitment, right, to helping Malaysian companies. As you've described it so well, we're an all-in HR platform for global teams. So what does it mean? Helping global companies manage their workforce in terms of payroll. So I always tell this, you work, you want to get paid on time. As simple as this. That's what Deel does.
Okay, Deel is a company that's literally grown on steroids. It was a startup in 2020. It is now last valued at 12 billion and it's hit 400 million US dollars in annual recurring revenue. Now, walk us through your APAC strategy because you've just opened in Malaysia, as you mentioned, but you've also just pretty much opened in Asia as well.
That's right. On steroids, right? We have something at Deel called Deel Speed. I can tell you this is our journey in and out. In Asia itself, so we've set up around 2.5 years now. So I was if I remember well, probably the third employee at Deel in the region. We are now around 750 of us in the space of 2 years. So the strategy was to really help companies in the region to pay their global workforce. So our growth has been really expedited by COVID, right, the pandemic, where we've seen companies who still needed to have the right talent in place, right, but couldn't, right, get those talent onshore, right? So they still needed a way business goes on to actually get their employees on board to work, right? So few use cases here, I must say. So one is, yes, talent shortage. You've heard it, probably you know, it's the buzzword, but it's the reality these days. You can't find a software engineer in Malaysia. Where else, right? So you need to open borders and be open-minded. Second is the retention, Brian, right? So companies that have had talent with them for a while and they wanted for some reason or the other, you know, either change country or go back home, you know. We've seen as well a lot of Malaysians, right, wanting to come home after the pandemic. So how does this company then retain them, right? Retain their skill set. I guess now what we hear, right, is again, because of talent shortage, either in terms of finding the right talent in the right place or retaining those skill set, right?
And so this is an interesting phenomenon. As you said, one of the key success factors of companies like Deel is the fact that the pandemic forced companies to be a lot more flexible in terms of where their workforces were located. Case in point, and I want to use that, is Singapore because of the limited amount of work permits that are available. Basically, many companies started then hiring across the region, not only because they couldn't get the right talent, but they couldn't get the permits, also from a cost-saving perspective as well.
100%. You've said it right. So we've commissioned Rakuten Insights, who just last month, so who did a research across 300 business leaders, right, in the region, so including Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia. Believe it or not, 82% of these business leaders said they had to go overseas to find the right talent. 82%, right? 91% of them actually said, yeah, if we haven't yet, we have to, right? So in terms of either you're expanding your business or you're actually looking for the right talent to join your team, right? But out of which, it's true, two factors drove this, right? 42% is cost, right? And the other percentage would actually be the lack of talent onshore. Indeed, admin, right? Admin when it comes to do I set up an entity? How do I get the right talent? Second is the admin around the mobility piece of everything, right? So the visas. Absolutely. You're right.
Now, the other thing that, and this is to educate the audience in terms of some of the little nuances that are associated with your business. There is something called professional employer organization and employer of record. Educate us as to the differences and what the key benefits and challenges are.
Indeed, the jargons, right? Isn't it, Brian? So if I may put it simply, right, for for people who are not maybe aware of what we call EOR, right? So in our practice, we will call it EOR, employer of record. So simply put, Malaysian company wanting to hire Brian. Brian, you're based in Vietnam, right? So you're an amazing software engineer. All the companies want to hire you, right? So Malaysian company hears that, yeah, we want Brian, but because you're in high demand, you're like, look, I don't really want to work on a consultant basis. I actually want to work as a full-time employee. I'm committed to the work I'm doing. But so I want to be paid my EPF version in my SOCSO, right, in Vietnam. So now as a Malaysian company, you're like, okay, well, we know we want to hire Brian, but we are not ready yet, to make the leap in establishing in Vietnam, going through all the paperwork of setting up an entity, right? So basically, there's a gap, as you can see. So this gap is basically fulfilled, and the solution that we propose is the employer of record. So the Malaysian company will come to us. We will have what we call, again, a master service agreement together, right? If I may go a little bit into details. So that will basically engage Deel to employ Brian on their behalf in Vietnam. So Brian, now you will get an employee agreement under Deel Vietnam. However, your relationship, so your day-to-day work is still through the Malaysian company, right? But at the same time, it's win-win because you as an employee, you will have the benefit of having the right employment contracts in terms of compliance. Second, you are paid your statutory funds, so the EPF version in Vietnam. And on the employer side, it's also, again, about compliance, making sure that, okay, I don't have yet, right, to think about admin of setting up in Vietnam. I don't have to actually worry about the different language, right, barrier, the different labor laws associated with getting you on board.
Yeah, absolutely. And so especially when you have just one or two employees as a start, those costs are onerous and unnecessary relative to getting boots on the ground and getting, for example, work done, sales, business development, and stuff.
Absolutely. So most of our customers will come to us for go-to-market leaders, right? I was talking to, we have an ecosystem of partners, right? Out of which we partner with recruitment firms. So recruitment firms locally in every country that we go, where they're like, okay, we want sales leaders, right? So we're a company in Singapore. We know there's a market for us, for example, in Malaysia, but we don't know, right? So how to find the right team. So, but we want to go fast, right? Because by default, some of them have already had customers on board, right? They just want to do more. A little bit like Deel, right? Yes. So when we came into the region, you asked me, what's our strategy? We came into APAC because we had customers already here, right? We had a demand. So when we decided to come in, we're like, okay, who are the people we'll put in place? Of course, we had a payroll team because that's our back office. But the second was really, we need a go-to-market team. Maybe we need it fast, right? So customers come to us for exactly the same reason, right? We want to be fast. We want it in a cost-effective manner, but also in a safe way, right? So because when you deal with people, right, as always, our business is about people, right? So of course, we're a tech company, but our business is really about people. Our customers are two, right? The companies, but also the employees.
Absolutely. Now, how does this work in terms of when you're an employer of record? This is not like running payroll. So from a cost-wise, how is that like the old days of contract staffing? And perhaps this is now just the next level of contract staffing, where you have a markup on their salary, or is there a service fee that you charge for this?
Good point. We're a SaaS company, right? So above all, we're a SaaS company. So we charge a subscription fee, so which is monthly. So it's a fixed fee that you get charged, right? So it's not a percentage, especially the percentage doesn't really work, right? Imagine, again, we talk about salespeople, right? The commission can be very little or it can be very high, isn't it, right?
Yes,
So you as a, right, if you're here as a sales leader, as a CFO, it's shaky, right? Oh, how much do I budget, right, for this month compared to next month? Hopefully
correct.
he does well or he doesn't do well, right? So depending on which side of the table you're on, so it's not predictable. So for us, the solution is simple, right? It's a flat fee, right? Very transparent, and of course, right, it comes at a at a certain cost, which is fair, we believe, for both parties, because at the end of the day, we also take the liability, right? Again, when we talk about compliance, it's about taking the liability of if there's something happening, for example, under this employment contract, Deel is completely responsible.
Okay, so interesting that, which brings me to my next question around you. You now expanding into Malaysia. What's the strategy here, and what are the sort of customers are you looking for in Malaysia?
So understanding the landscape here, as I said, right? So for us, it's a bit reactive and proactive, right? So reactive first, and then we became proactive. So reactive is we've gotten requests for, so we have a base of Malaysian companies that we support today, right? So they're, so predominantly in tech, to be honest with you, Brian, right? These days, right? A lot of tech companies, the adoption is quicker, we see. However, in a place like Malaysia where the industries are quite, so oil and gas, manufacturing, right, are quite predominant. We see an adoption. So again, the use case then would be slightly different, right? So then we don't really talk about, so we talk about employment of record when it comes to maybe retention first, right? Have this amazing colleague, they've been working for us. It's very hard to replace that person, but that person now wants to, like go back home, or we even had customers saying, their kids are grown up now, they want to go and accompany them to university and be based there, right? You hear those stories, right? So these are high level executives, right, that have served for many years. They still want, right, both parties want to retain this this skill set, but they don't know how to, right? Because on paper perspective, they might not want to open a branch in Australia, just because some executive want to go to Australia to accompany their kids, right?
Yes.
So again, right? So that's the retention part. So that's basically the entry point, right? When we talk about to larger corporation. Then once we are basically having that conversation, so we run what we call an HR leaders group, right, where we're very close, right, to the ground with the HR practitioners to understand, okay, what are their pain points here, right? So then the next phase would be, okay, so as a matter of fact, the business is asking us to find software engineers, but we can't find them here, as we know, right? There's a talent shortage in certain industries, right? So again, how can we now help those HR practitioners think otherwise? Which means your landscape is not anymore KL. It could actually broaden into other part of the country itself, or it could actually be in Southeast Asia or even Eastern Europe, right? The hubs of engineers these days. So that's how. So we are really basically, that's why we are really interested, right, to talk to the leaders, right? So when we run, I remember when we ran the first club, it was in Singapore, and the one in Malaysia is coming up in February. So we ran this session, and the first thing that came out of one of the CHRO was, oh, our role has become multidimensional, right? So the HR leader role has also changed, right? They're not anymore, like this department where you go to complain about your payslip. They are now invited, right, to the table with the CEO, with the business leader, saying, okay, what's our proactive strategy here in one, attracting the right workforce, to finding them and retaining them, right? So I think then when we talk to them, the key then is, of course, data, right? So do they have enough data, right, to go and actually make decision in a predictable way and not anymore on an emotional way, like we think this is, we heard, we read, but yeah.
Now, looking ahead then, and I see a lot of opportunities for companies actually to take advantage of your services. But for 2024, Karen, what are the priorities for Deel?
For us is to simple expand our footprint in APAC, so in the region, but by being mostly connected to the local ecosystem, right? So as I always say, we're a global company, yes, headquartered in Silicon Valley, branched in the US, branched in Europe, and now in APAC. But for us, is really to build our local ecosystem, right? So first is, as I said, so when we come, for example, in Malaysia, so last week we've launched, but prior to that, right, the whole work we've done is work with organizations like Talent Corp, work with organizations like Matrade, right? So work with the American Chamber of Commerce, the Malaysian International Chamber of Commerce, local recruitment agencies, right? Local bodies who can actually help us to talk about this talent movement, right? So we're here to basically solve, hopefully, that talent shortage, or at least minimize it, right? So that's basically our mission in the region.
Karen, it's been a fascinating conversation. Very useful information, I think, for a lot of companies, both small and large. But before we leave, any final thoughts you'd like to leave the audience with?
Yes, sure. Again, we're here as a local partner. So if you'd like to get in touch, right, to talk about, like even to participate, right, in our HR club, more than happy to welcome, right, new members. Part of as we develop, as we learn, right, together on how to bridge that gap in the talent space.
Now, Karen, thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show.
Thank you, Brian. A pleasure.
I'm Brian Fernandez, and we've been speaking to Karen Ng. She's a regional head of expansion and market lead for Singapore, Hong Kong, ASEAN, and India at Deel. And this has been BizTech's Technology Show. This interview will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.